There was a time when you could take a photograph and be absolutely certain no one else would ever see it. No cloud, no backup, no copy. Just you, the camera, and a small white rectangle slowly coming to life in your hands. That time is gone. And most people never noticed when it disappeared. Before digital cameras, before smartphones, before social media, photography wasn't about sharing. It was about keeping. A photograph was a physical object. If you had it, you owned it. If you destroyed it, it was gone forever. Ownership wasn't a legal concept. It was physical. You could feel it in your hands, in the thickness of the paper, in the way the edges curled slightly with time. Polaroid didn't just invent instant photography. It invented private photography. Teenagers took Polaroids at parties and burned them the next morning, not because they were ashamed, but because they could, because the moment belonged to them, not to a server, not to a corporation, not to forever. The photo existed for one night. It witnessed laughter, mistakes, intimacy. It saw things no one else would ever see. And then it disappeared. That was the agreement. No archive, no resurrection, no consequences. When a Polaroid camera clicked, nothing went anywhere. No signal left the room. No data traveled through cables. No server stored your moment. The image existed only where you were standing, only as long as you allowed it to exist. That mattered more than we realized. If you're over 40, you remember the ritual. The sound of the shutter, the mechanical whir, the photo sliding out into your palm, the faint chemical smell, the warmth of the print, the instinct to wave it gently in the air. You didn't rush. You waited. You watched the image appear slowly, as if the moment itself was deciding whether it wanted to exist. That waiting created gravity. It told your brain, this matters. A Polaroid photo couldn't be edited. It couldn't be filtered. It couldn't be corrected. You accepted what it gave you. There was no second version. Each photo was an original, a single object, a single truth. If someone blinked, that was the photo. If the lighting was wrong, that was the photo. The imperfection was the proof. If you handed it to someone, you trusted them. If you hid it, it stayed hidden. If you destroyed it, it disappeared from the world as if it had never existed. No ghost copy. No backup. No screenshot. That's something digital photography never replaced. Because digital photos don't exist as objects. They exist as data. And data is never private for long. Something else existed in that pre-digital world. Something we rarely talk about now. Silence. Photographs did not demand attention. They didn't notify you. They didn't resurface on anniversaries. They didn't remind you of themselves. A Polaroid stayed where you left it, in a drawer, in a box, in a book, or forgotten entirely. And forgetting was allowed. In the analog world, memory had friction. You had to choose what to keep. Film was limited. Storage took space. Albums filled up. Every photograph asked a quiet question. Is this worth saving? That question no longer exists. With Polaroid, the answer was immediate. You held the result in your hands. You felt its weight. You knew instinctively whether it deserved a place in your life or whether it should disappear. That decision belonged to you alone. No algorithm suggested otherwise. Today, photographs decide for themselves. They save automatically. They duplicate silently. They spread without permission. They refuse to disappear. In the analog era, embarrassment had an ending. A bad photo could be torn, burned, thrown away. It would never return. There was relief in that, a sense of closure. In the digital era, embarrassment is permanent. Screenshots exist. Backups exist. Someone else always has a copy. You don't control the lifespan of your own image anymore. This changed how people behaved. Not suddenly. Gradually, people became careful, performative. self-editing before the photo even existed. With Polaroid, the moment came first. Judgment came later. With smartphones, judgment comes first. The moment adjusts to survive it. That shift didn't just change photography. It changed people. In the Polaroid era, a photograph was evidence that something happened. In the digital era, a photograph is proof that something was approved, liked, shared, validated, or deleted. Polaroid photographs were rarely perfect. Faces were slightly blurred. Colors were inconsistent. Light behaved strangely. But those flaws anchored the image in time. They reminded you, this happened once. And only once. Digital photography removed that anchor. Every image is editable, correctable, repeatable. Moments are no longer unique. They are versions. That's why digital photos age differently. Not with nostalgia, with indifference. Think about how many photographs you took last year. Hundreds, thousands. How many do you remember? How many can you describe without opening your phone? Polaroid photographs didn't need reminders. They were reminders. They sat quietly until you found them again. And when you did, they brought back not just the image, but the feeling of holding it. The texture mattered. The smell mattered. The physical presence mattered. Memory was not abstract. It was tactile. This is what Polaroid protected. Not speed, not convenience. Boundaries. Digital photography removed boundaries. And with them, it removed the sense of finality. Nothing ever feels finished anymore. Photos can always be edited, reposted, reinterpreted, even years later. Polaroid allowed moments to end. That ending gave them meaning. This is why Polaroid feels heavier in memory than it ever was in reality. It carried weight because it accepted loss. Digital systems do not. They hoard. We now live in a world where forgetting requires effort. And effort is expensive. This is not an accident. It is the cost of convenience. Polaroid cameras were everywhere. Birthdays, family dinners, graduations, backstage moments, bedrooms, places where people behaved. Honestly, because they knew the moment could not escape. The camera didn't watch you. It didn't remember after you were done. It didn't wait to be discovered later. It didn't betray you. Edwin Land, Polaroid's founder, believed technology should feel human. He didn't want to remove friction entirely. He wanted to design it. The waiting mattered. The chemistry mattered. The limitation mattered, because limitation creates meaning. Without limits, everything dissolves. Andy Warhol carried a Polaroid camera everywhere, not because it was fast, but because each shot was unrepeatable. He used it before paintings, before silkscreens, before faces became brands. Warhol once said, "A picture means I know where I was every minute." He didn't mean GPS. He meant presence, physical, unreproducible, final presence. A Polaroid wasn't a sketch. It was a commitment. In the 1970s and 1980s, Polaroid was a giant. It owned instant photography. It owned the patents, the chemistry, the process. It owned the magic. Artists used it. Families used it. Scientists used it. Not because it was convenient, but because it was honest. Because it respected boundaries. And this is the part that rarely gets mentioned. Polaroid actually invented the first digital camera inside its own labs. Engineers warned management that digital photography would eventually replace film. Polaroid saw the future and chose not to protect it. Not because they were stupid, but because they believed the world would always value limits. They were wrong. Digital cameras arrived and promised something irresistible. Instant results without consequences. Take the photo. Check it. Delete it. Try again. No waiting. No chemistry. No commitment. What felt like freedom was actually the beginning of disposability. When smartphones arrived, the transformation was complete. Photos no longer lived in drawers. They lived in systems. Backups, syncing, cloud storage. You no longer decided where your photos existed. Software did. Photos stopped being things you owned. They became things you accessed. And access can always be revoked, by accident, by policy, by design. Social media finished the job. Photos stopped being memories. They became content. They were judged, ranked, consumed. The value of a photo was no longer emotional. It was algorithmic. Digital photography didn't just make photos easier. It made them public by default. Every image became portable, searchable, shareable, permanent, even the ones you never meant to keep, even the ones you thought you deleted. Polaroid couldn't compete with that, not because its technology was bad, but because its philosophy was incompatible. Polaroid required patience. Digital demanded speed. Polaroid respected boundaries. Digital erased them. By the early 2000s, Polaroid was collapsing. It tried to adapt. It released digital cameras. But by then, it wasn't Polaroid anymore. It was just another device in a world full of devices. The magic was gone. In 2008, Polaroid announced it would stop producing instant film. People panicked. Not because they loved the brand. They panicked because they realized they were about to lose the ability to take a photograph that couldn't be uploaded. That couldn't be hacked. That couldn't resurface years later in someone else's system. For the first time, people understood what instant photography had been protecting. Instant photography eventually returned, but not as necessity, as nostalgia, as rebellion, as resistance. Today, people buy instant cameras because they're tired of clouds, tired of feeds, tired of knowing their memories exist on someone else's server. They want a photo that can't be shared, a moment that can't escape, a memory that can't betray them. Polaroid didn't die because it failed. It died because it protected something the modern world decided it didn't need. Privacy, finality, forgetting. Smartphones didn't just kill Polaroid. They killed the idea that some moments should stay small, that some memories should remain fragile, that not everything needs to be saved forever. We gained convenience. We lost control. Every photo you take today exists longer than you think. On devices you don't own. In systems you can't see. In backups you can't erase. Polaroid understood something digital cameras never did. That memory isn't just about capturing moments. It's about deciding which ones get to survive and which ones are allowed to disappear. Polaroid protected your secrets, and the world traded that protection for speed, for sharing, for comfort. Nothing replaced what Polaroid was. Something easier did. And one day, we may finally understand what that cost us. Or maybe we already do, and we're just too late to get it back.